Our next guest is Chessa Bouche, who joins us from Louisiana. There has been nothing short of a lot of storylines coming out of that area. I feel like every single time we've had you on, there's been something new to talk about. This past week, there's been some noise with Brian Kelly. We'll jump into that. But first of all, another game here with Frank Wilson in as the interim head coach for this LSU football team. Obviously, last week against Alabama, it was a better team. Bama seemed to be in control. The game really did not, as far as the score overall, if you look at it overall, you don't think it's a blowout really either way. But it seemed like Bama was in control. What did you make of his first game there, and then what they were able to do at quarterback with both Van Buren and Nussmeier getting action?
Yeah, I will tell you, even in pre-games, there was a different energy, a different vibe from this team, which was expected, especially because Frank Wilson is one of those guys that he has a hand in all of these recruits. So all of these guys know him on a personal level. He's from Louisiana. He started as a high school coach in New Orleans, and he just brings that grit and that fire and that determination. I think that this team has maybe been missing the past few years. And even when they were getting ready to run out of the tunnel, they did kind of their old school little swag, sway, kind of just, it was different. I even tweeted out before kickoff, I was like, regardless of the outcome in this game, there's a different energy with this team that they had been missing all season long. So I love to see that. Frank Wilson, if you've heard any of his post-game comments, or even when they named him the interim coach, he talks about how he loves Louisiana. It's different. Not everybody fits in here. I get it. And just one of those of like, you want to run through a brick wall because you know he's who he is, and he's genuine, and he's fiery, and he's passionate, and so he just exudes that. So I was excited to see the product on the field. I was impressed with the defense holding Alabama to just 20 points, their second lowest total of the season. The only other lowest total was their 17-point loss to Florida State. So I thought the defense held you in this ball game yet again. We've said this aside from maybe 2 games all season. So I thought that was promising. It sucked, to be completely honest, of just, if your offense could just get into the end zone and not settle for field goals, you have a chance. And it was just like, man, they couldn't do it. I did like the spark off the bench with Michael Van Buren. Gave this a little bit of life. He went and put together a drive, but again, they stalled out in the red zone, which they have done basically all season long, aside from the Clemson game. And so I thought he brings another dimension to this offense, because he can extend plays with his legs, something that Nuss has a little bit of ability to do that. Nothing like Michael Van Buren. So I just thought that maybe they should have brought him in at halftime, especially because of the way things had gone offensively in the first half. But I like that Frank Wilson wasn't scared to say, hey, my guy, you're not getting it done. We're going to try something different. So I respected that. He did say earlier in the week that they're going to burn Michael Van Buren's red shirt, and both quarterbacks are going to play this weekend. I'm interested to see how they divvy that up. I don't really like the 2 quarterback system. I feel like if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. So yeah, I hate it for Gerhard Nussmeier, with all the promise and with all of the hype surrounding this team. And especially, we've talked about it from Jaden Daniels year 1 to year 2, and then Joe Burrow year 1 to year 2, and you really expected a big jump from Garrett this year, and it just hasn't happened. Granted, he has an offensive line that is not great and just basically pieced together, so I understand it. You have no run game to really help you out, so this offense is limited. But I do think Michael Van Buren brings a little different dimension, and it puts a little bit more pressure on the defense. So I think maybe that's the way to go, especially just because of the struggles, and especially the struggles in the red zone.
Absolutely. What's the overall energy been like with this program? Because I feel like, and you mentioned it, holding Alabama to 20 points, you got a spark from your backup quarterback. Going into this week against Arkansas, I was just talking with Patrick about this a moment ago. I think that LSU, just pound for pound, the players that are walking off the bus for LSU are better than the players walking off the bus for Arkansas, just period. But what's the overall sense of what this team will try to do from a mentality standpoint going into the end of the year? Bowl games kind of seem good for some programs, not good for this program.
It's funny that you said that. My sports director, Brian Holland, he was like, Chessa, you might be able to go home and cover the Independence Bowl. And I was just like, Not really one of my favorite bowls. I will say, growing up, I like to go to it, but not so much as covering it for the media. I know people are going to hate me yet again for not saying the best things about the Independence Bowl, but it's Shreveport. South Louisiana is better. I'm just saying. I'm being real. So no, but the energy in the building is a lot different. I think these guys are really playing for pride now, and I know that's kind of cliche of saying they're just playing for pride. No, I think because of how the season has gone, the situation they've been in, having to play for a new interim head coach, and also Arkansas has always played spoiler to LSU since I was growing up. I've seen this time and time again. There's nothing truly to spoil this season, but there's nothing that Arkansas would love more than to come in and get a win in Death Valley over LSU, especially with an interim head coach. It gives me a lot of pause because, like y'all said, Petrino has really put on a clinic offensively. That's something that LSU has not been able to do all season long, is put up a lot of points. So you're facing another solid offense. But I will say last year when they played against Taylor Green, he was coming off of an ankle injury, but they did a really good job of containing him. So I'm interested to see how Blake Baker kind of schemes it up this week of what's going to happen. And also I thought it was a good sign to see Wes Weeks Whit Weeks, excuse me, back at practice. Will he go Saturday? I'm not sure. They haven't, really told us what that's going to look like. But for him to be practicing, that's a step forward in the right direction. So, again, I'm from North Louisiana. I love South Louisiana. That's why I live here. I've been here for over 10 years. Arkansas just gets on my nerves. And so if LSU could put up some points and kind of silence them and get another win in SEC play, that'd make me feel a lot better because I don't see them doing that in a couple weeks in Norman.
Chessa, I'm gonna be honest. I think the folks in Arkansas are already on to basketball, so they're gonna be silent as is. I have to do our due diligence here with the coaching search. We just talked about Nick Saban being the betting favorite. I think that's Vegas just trying to get some money here. But a name that was the third highest odds was Joe Brady with the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, Brady was with LSU and helped develop Joe Burrow. Could you see LSU trying to go for a guy that can develop quarterbacks, seeing how the quarterback has played out this year?
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I will say that that's kind of been the chatter. Anytime there's a coaching search, everybody always elects back to Joe Brady. He's never had head coaching experience. He's flat out said, I don't want to coach in college. So I don't know if maybe that changes because the Bills have kind of fluctuated this season offensively with him being the play caller. Again, I'm not one of those proponents of, yeah, let's go get a guy because he's younger and I like the more experienced guys, which obviously that burned us with Brian Kelly. So I'd rather get somebody who's a coordinator who's been successful with a D1 program that's either in the SEC or maybe a smaller school, but still kind of knows what to look for. I don't really like the thought of, hey, because you helped that 2019 national championship team, you were here for 1 year and now we're going to give you the keys to this program. It gives me a lot of pause just because you're not proven. And I feel like maybe a coordinator with more experience would fit the job better because it's not your typical job. It comes with a lot. Being the LSU head coach, there is a target on your back and whatever you do is going to be out there for everybody and everybody's going to talk about it on and off the field. And I just feel like somebody who's younger maybe isn't prepared for the kind of heat that comes with that.
Absolutely. You invoked the name of Brian Kelly, and I have to ask this question about him because typically, and what I've been talking about this with Patrick for the last couple of days, is typically whenever a coach gets fired and the buyout situation happens, what ends up happening is that the buyout number gets everybody's attention, and then it just falls off everybody's mind because nobody thinks about it. Everybody's like, okay, well, the school will pay up and he'll get his checks and, he'll be fine. Now this is being played out in a really public and kind of ugly way where the reports came out that Brian Kelly rejected 2 offers. By the way, I do not blame him at all for that. But then now there's like a lawsuit going back and forth. 2 things. What do you make of just this publicly playing out as much as it has? And how much do you think this might affect the public perception for the next guy that's going to be the coach, given how ugly, quote unquote, this has been in the public eye?
Well, I think it's definitely going to have a black cloud over this program because of how it's been handled, because of the governor going on and acting a donkey and saying all the things he had to say. And then you're basically saying, hey, we don't want to pay you as much as we paid the last guy, but I want you to come in and win national championships. But if you don't, you will be out in 3 years, regardless of that. So to me, it's a terrible look. I don't think it's the way it's been handled, it's been mishandled from start to finish, and it's basically made a mockery of this program. And I hate that because, again, I went to LSU I got my master's from LSU, and I covered this team. And so it's just crazy to me that I thought things got wild during the Ed Ogeron.
Yeah.
His final season being the lame duck coach and all the craziness off the field that came with it. And I thought, well, that's going to be the craziest thing I ever covered. And then they were like, no, hold my beer, Brian Kelly out the door. This is what we're doing. So it's just, I don't know. And to be honest, I feel like somebody who would be able to handle something like this would be Lane Kiffin, just because of he's been through kind of it all, from the Tennessee stuff to USC and being a head coach in the NFL, and then basically dealing with an owner who blasted you to the media. So I feel like if anybody could handle it and the antics that have kind of played out in public, I think Lane Kiffin would be the guy. Do I think he leaves Oxford? Not really. Like, if Lane Kiffin can look in the mirror and say, hey, we can win a natty here, then maybe. But yeah, it just blows me away to see the back and forth. And I understand where Brian Kelly's coming from. He's like, hey, give me my money. But man, you didn't do what you said you were going to do. So there's got to be some give and take. But I don't feel like that man's going to give anything. He wants to take it all.
Yeah, he does. And I don't blame him. You know, if you're going to owe me, you know, half of $100 million, you're going to pay me every dime of that, $54 million. Of course, there's a few games left here on this schedule for this LSU football team, and I think a very winnable game coming up this week, and then Western Kentucky, and then the game against Oklahoma. We got a chance to hear from Frank Wilson on the matchup against the Hogs.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great question, because we're not out on anything. Again, I think if you look at body of work and you isolate it, that's good. That was good. We missed that. We got to be able to get that. And they're both imperfect in that sense. They both brought something to the table that helped this team to go up and down the field. They both have things that they need to continue to work on as well. And so I don't think it's just a clear separation where one is beyond the other. That we'll need both of them, and I think and I know we'll use both of them in this game.
So for this LSU offense, in both these quarterbacks that are coming into this matchup, which one do you think gives the Tigers the biggest spark this week?
I think the spark would be Michael Van Buren. I will say we talked to players on Tuesday night. They had nothing but love for Garrett Nussmeier, and I think you have to admire what Nuss has been through. He's waited his turn. He stayed here through a Heisman campaign, could have easily transferred out, and he was like, no, this is where I want to be. So I respect him in that regard. What I had heard leading into the season is that maybe he had overworked himself, and so he wasn't healthy from jump, aside from the rib or the oblique injury, and then also dealing with the knee stuff. So I think it's been a culmination of everything. I think Michael Van Buren, again, just brings a different dynamic to this offense, and I don't feel like he's really had a true shake at showing what he can do and, you know, taking the first team reps. I know that they're splitting the reps this week, but I think Michael Van Buren would be a better way to go, just in the sense of he's healthy. He did start 8 games at Mississippi State as a true freshman. And if you're going to burn your red shirt, I feel like he should get a opportunity to actually display what he has. Don't just use him for a drive here or there. Like, say, hey, this is your game. Show us what you got, especially if you want to see if he's your guy for next season.